As a kid, I always wanted a tree house, and I envied every single one of my friends that had one. I even had a friend who had a professionally made treehouse in his yard that had a slide that went down to the ground and a porch with a launch pad that jumped onto a trampoline. And I didn't even have a tree in my yard to build a treehouse, much less the resources to have it professionally made. And I always wanted a treehouse, and I could never get one until finally one day I was hanging out in this field in my neighborhood, in the back of the neighborhood, and there it was. Man, the perfect tree. It hung over the river. It was a beautiful sight from sitting atop the branches, and there was perfect armrests even. It was just the one. So I went home, I grabbed some 2x4s, a hammer, and some nails, and I came back and I built my tree house. Now, my standards for a tree house were pretty low. It was basically just a couple boards nailed into the trunk so I could step up there, and some boards nailed together for a seat. But you know what? It didn't matter, because I had something in my mind that I wanted to build, and I did it. I think that desire that we have inside of us to build something, to create something, I think that's something that we all share. I think we all have that in common. You know, we have something that we're passionate about, and whatever that is, we pursue that passion, and we want to create our own unique version of that for the world. Whether you're an athlete or an artist or an inventor or a businessman, you want to produce your own unique version, your product, your brand, and you want to present that to the world. We are all building something. But what if I told you that God has something bigger in mind that He wants you to build? What if God has a very unique, specific building project just for you, bigger than you could ever imagine? In 586 BC, the Babylonians came along and raided Israel, destroyed the city of Jerusalem, and laid the temple to ruins. The king scattered the Jews all over the land, and their society and their culture was destroyed. Well, then 50 years later, in 536 BC, another king came along and said, okay, you can go home. Well, the Jews were all about rebuilding the city, but for 16 years, the temple laid in ruins. They were so preoccupied with building up their own houses and worried about their own comfort and their own convenience that they didn't even touch the house of God. And this wasn't just any building. This was the place where the Spirit of God was supposed to rest, where His Spirit would dwell. So God sends His prophet Haggai to give this message in Haggai chapter 1, verse 4. He says, "Is it a time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses while this house lies in ruins?" And then down in verse 7, he goes on to say, "Consider your ways, go up to the hills and bring wood and build the house, that I may take pleasure in it and that I may be glorified, says the Lord. You looked for much, and behold, it came to little. And when you brought it home, I blew it away. Why, declares the Lord of hosts? Because of my house that lies in ruins, while each of you busies himself with his own house." The Israelites were so preoccupied with building up their own houses that they missed out on the holy and divine building project that God had for them. They missed out on building the house of God. They missed out on building a place where they could approach a metaphorical throne of the only King. They missed out on building the place where the Spirit would rest. And now, 2,500 years later, after the death and resurrection of Jesus, the temple is no longer a building, it's a place inside of us. So what I'm wondering is, are you missing out on that project? Have you begun to build a temple in your own heart where God's Spirit can dwell? Have you created a throne in your heart for the King to sit? Or are you too preoccupied building up your own house? And if you do have that temple inside of you, have you begun to help others build that temple inside of them? God is crying out to you, just like He did the Israelites all those years ago, not to use your passions and your gifts and that innate desire inside of you to build up your own house, but to use this desire that we have to create and to build and to produce things, to build a kingdom. So what are you building?